Hello everybody and welcome to our first scripting language review. This is for Bash. What I will be doing here is I will be going through much the same process that I do with learning a new language. Throughout my 40 years experience with computers, I've had to learn a lot of new languages, some to a greater degree than others. This is my general way I approach them. First thing I do is I look for the official website and the reference site so that I can make sure that I am using the language in the way it's intended. For Bash, your official site is on new.org, and it takes a while to pull up. And here we go. Here's here's the official site, and it talks about how to document. The download documentation. Documentation is it's right here. This is the other site that I told you about. Now, if you like all your documentation in one place, here you go. The information I gave you, I believe, was the PDF, so you can download it and have it. Okay, so that gives you a basic reference, and that gives you a basic official site. I have here a hyperlink here, and it's to the manual site. It gives you a very brief history of Bash. Basically, it started out as a shell program for Linux, and then Brian Fox released a version of it that he called the Born Again shell, kind of a play on words for the person that came up with the original shell in 1989. That's basically the one we're using today. Not much philosophy in Bash because it is basically it's a shell command. It's very close to the operating system. We will study some language that very definitely have philosophies, and sometimes most of them you find out that the creator has a very well developed sense of his self-worth. Okay, programming aids, we look for interactive display environments. We look for processing directives. Those are also called pragmas. Those are instructions to the program on how to process the file you're giving them. You also talk about error handling. You'll learn more about that in your C class, and whether or not there's an interpreter available. Okay, for the IDE, there are plenty of third-party IDEs available for Bash. We are going to use a very primitive one. What we plan to use is gedit. For the gedit for the program itself to type it out. To run it, we'll just use a terminal. Now, one thing that you will have to do, there's a couple of gotchas here, and I got some of them up here and some of them I'll tell you. One is that if you're not accustomed to Linux security, it's very strict, and you have to remember, here's the magic words if something doesn't run due to security. Okay, that changes it to where it is a runnable file. Now, if you notice up here, I've got it says run this with Bash. It understands that. It looks for that. Now, below that, you have a comment, because that's the first thing I generally learn when I do a program is how to do comments, because my practice is I write my programs out in pseudocode and I put them in comments and I program to the comments. For somebody who's over 60, it helps you keep on track. Okay, for further, we have here where it echoes. This is where it puts something out to the screen. Then you have where you define a variable. Now notice that here I define it. Here I have an echo back out. I have a $sign here because what I'm saying is I'm saying echo the contents of the variable, my variable. Now here I don't have the $sign, and we'll just see what it does. I'm going to come over here. This is how I run my my script. Okay, and it was trying to run it as a command. Now, here I did the same thing with testing too. However, the problem is I put spaces in between everything. When you do that, it just doesn't behave itself. So what I will do is I will highlight this and copy it, and I'll put it in my terminal. I'll paste it, and I'll go back in. I'll take the take the spaces out from around the equal sign. And let's see if it behaves itself now. Now, if I just say my variable instead of echo my variable, it'll try to read my variable and execute it as a command. That's not what I want to do. I just wanted to tell me about it. Okay, and this time it behaves itself. Okay, so that's a couple little gotchas out of the way, and let's get back to the PowerPoint. Okay, and you saw that I was able to stop. And I was able to run a command at a time. That's what's called an interpreter. You can do that with Bash, and there's a couple other programs you can do that. That's really handy when you're going through a program line by line and trying to troubleshoot it. Okay, Hello World, first program. I'm kind of building up to that. As you can see, you will have an extension to that you will have for your lab, or you have already had for your lab probably by this time. Okay, single line, you use a pound sign or a hashtag, as some of you younger people might call it. This is true of several languages. There are no multi-line comments in Bash. It's supposed to be very, very primitive. It's supposed to be very, very basic. Okay, console input output. We notice we had that. Don't forget the dollar sign. Declaring variables. If you echo out again, don't forget the dollar sign. Grouping code. They use curly brackets, as a lot of programs use to group their code together, saying this is a block of code, execute it in one shot. Okay, for basic symbols, sometimes you have a difference between equality versus assignments. In Bash, your assignment is strictly speaking the equal sign. You can also use the equal sign for equality if you want to. Now this -EQ here, this is only good for numerical. So if you have something you try to do that with a string, it's gonna boo you. Speaking of boo, here's booleans. You have a true, a false, you have a not, you have a O for or and an A for and there's also a symbolic way to do that. Increment is a double plus or a double minus if you want to increment or decrement. This is basically an immediate if statement. This is if, and then you have a statement in here, then you say, then this colon is then, and then you got something you do. I look for these in part of a language because these are some of the first things I use. Okay, string manipulation. Here I've got this hyperlink, and this is a good reference on string manipulations. Okay, interpret. What happens is interpret, if you have a single quote, if you try to put a variable in there, it does not put the value of the variable in there. If you have if you do double quotes, it does. Like, for example, I'm going to redefine echo move this over where everybody can see it. Okay, notice it stuck in the value. So I said, this is, give me the value of my variable, and it stuck it right in there. It's kind of nice when you're trying to do substitutions. Okay, search and replace, grep, you will have a lab on that. That's the tool for Linux that makes Windows users jealous. This is basically a search and replace or a search and find. This is how you do a regular expression. You have the string and the substring. This is one of several ways to do it, and regular expression is something that's kind of like a specialized offset screwdriver. It's very useful when It's very useful when you need it, but there's some things that you just can't get by without it. Basically, for regular expressions, I relearn them when I use them, and then I probably forget them in between whiles. Okay, file input in output. There's a thing called cache, and I have it hyperlinked, so there's more details to this. Subprograms are called functions. You notice you have the braces here. This is how you define a code block, and if you say hello, it echoes hello. And here again is the how-to on how to do that. If then else statements, there's no case statements, there's an if then else statement. Now most of the time they end it with end if, they end theirs with phi, which is probably something people say a lot when they program in bash along with fooey and other exclamations. And what happens is up here I have it hyperlinked, so this is the example that this is the page this example comes from, so you can look it up. Iteration, you have a for, and we have I have it hyperlinked there. And bash basically has arrays, and we have a link here into arrays. Okay, I gave you some common errors, and here's a list of other common errors and initial features. Remember that you've got to set your program so it's executable, and no spaces around assignment operators. If you set something equal to something else, don't put any spaces in between. And also, don't forget the difference between a variable and the contents of a variable. When you put a $sign in front of a variable, you're saying, give me the contents of this memory location. Okay, that's everybody's favorite slide, and I hope this helps.